But I don't see a way out of this. Like, it's really assuming that you know a lot more than you do, which is just known as gaiva in Yiddish, and as whatever you call the machl over here. Okay, sure. Anyways, that was shtism. Where am I now?
Should we pick up where we left off last time, or would I have recorded?
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you where. I'm gonna tell you where I'm up to last time. You don't tell me, I tell you.
My dad is the best ever.
Where we're up to is like this. In general, we're up to, and I hope to finish. Wow, it's very 10 to 10. Let's see what we do. I'll send you the whole recording, and you tell me where
the cutoff is,
where it's empty, and you'll like write it up. And
okay.
No, just no. What we did is let me say where I'm hoping to get. We said that there's a general definition of the soul from Rabbi Aristo. General meaning not the definition of a specific kind of soul, or not the definition of a, right? It's what is to be a soul in general, which is be sheared by anything that has a soul, which is another way of saying anything that's alive. Which, by the way, here he's talking only about things that are bodies that have a soul. He does explicitly, and we're going to have to get to that later in this book, also think that not only bodies can be alive, which is a little thing that we have to figure out what exactly that means, but it's not only bodies that are alive, because separate intellects are definitely alive also, according to him. And the human separate intellect or active intellect might also be alive, and it's not a body. So it's not only bodies that have souls, but living things. So it's the living things that are this definition here. But this definition seems to be living bodies that have souls, more than living things in general. So there's something where this definition is not entirely generalized.
And the soul is what does
at
the
least,
living.
At least for the tradition that takes it very seriously, this option of the body, the non-bodily entities also being alive. The academics, like Hantic academics, tend not to take this part of Aristotle seriously, but the entire tradition took it very seriously. So you have to remember that. That's the most general definition. Now we explained that the most general definition of that, right? What it means. Definition means what it means. Definition doesn't mean defining a word, right? I wanted to say another whole dilution about this, but not now. Definition means defining a thing, not a word. You don't get to confuse because I use this word definition because it's the language that we use, but it doesn't mean what you think the dictionary does. This is not what the dictionary does. It's what philosophers do. Dictionary just defines words, and we don't think that words are the main thing here. Definition meaning what it is for that thing to be it. Okay. Now we explained that for this definition to even more basically make sense, we need to know all of the concepts that he's using, right? All of the basic distinctions, all the basic things. And I had a list of them. And we discussed substance and accidents. We discussed matter and form. We discussed potentiality and actuality. We discussed two kinds of actuality. These are my more or less things that we did up till now. We did also more things. We discussed how bodies are the basic thing for him. Four things that have bodies. Again, this is a very limited thing because not everything is a body. And we discussed natural bodies versus artificial bodies, right? And we discussed out of natural bodies we could have living bodies and not living bodies. And then putting all these things together, in other words, really there's two big groups of concepts that we're putting together. If you follow what I'm doing, that's really what I'm maybe try to finish talking about today. The one is the most general concepts, right? We have this list of general concepts, which is matter and form, substance and accident, potential and actual. That's basically the three big things. And then into that we will we'll connect that with what a soul is. In other words, the soul is the form, or more precisely, the second actuality, so a certain kind of form, right? This first actuality, second potentiality, first actuality of something, right? So we understand already what a form is, and that it's of what? Of this living natural body, which has a soul, which potentially has a soul. So that's really what the main mahalach of it, right? We have this abstract concept, and then we have what it's of. Now, the connection of these two things, of these two parts, like how the soul is the form of this kind of body, is the connection, is the most hard thing to get at. That's what we really mean by the connection of the form and the matter, which is very important relationship to understand, which is the only thing that makes us understand his whole way of thinking, right? So, in other words, this is what here's where we were last time, because I think we went through most of these other parts up to that, Does that make sense? My story. Where we were last time mostly is to explain that, and like I gave the header, okay, that forms and matters are one thing. Okay, it's very important. That's what Aristotle is going to feed us over here. Well, it's up at the end. It's in page 3 over here. All the way in the end. That therefore, whatever you see him saying over here. Therefore, the soul cannot be separated from the body. He says it before that also once. 1 second. He already said it once before. Oh, here in letter 9, in number 9. I made numbers. In number 9, it says, hence too, therefore, because I explained that a soul is the form of a kind of body, I'm gonna have to explain some of that more. Therefore, we can't even ask the question if the soul and the body are one, which is another way of asking the question, which is one of the basic questions that he said and promised in the beginning of the book he's going to answer, which is if the soul is separable from the body. And according to him, the question doesn't even make sense. That's really what he's trying to get at. Because it's just like we can't ask whether the wax and the impression are one, right? And this is always one of his examples for a form and a matter. Like if you have a piece of wax and then you put your stamp on it to sign your envelope, no, this is only on the wine bottles they have it. Right? And now someone will come and ask you, okay, so is the wax and the picture one thing or two things? The answer is sort of depends how you look at it. And that's what Aristotle's answer is. And what happens if you take away the wax? Things stop existing. The stamp stops existing. What happens if you take away the picture? The picture also stops existing. Well, the matter stays, but that's not interesting for us right now. But it's still one thing. And in other words, how do I say it? Right, the whole of the bagel doesn't go anywhere when you eat the bagel. It just stops existing. Right? Is there a bagel and a hole or a hole and a bagel? Does the hole exist separately from the bagel? Obviously not. Right? Does it not exist? Is it just an accident of a bagel? Also not. At least not in the form level of it, sense. Because it's what it is to be a bagel. The whole of a bagel, or the roundness of the bagel, really, the form of the bagel. Whatever makes a bagel is what makes it a bagel. You can't say that it's just something that happened, right? Nobody would tell you that the picture on the form, on the stamp, on the wax, it's just something that happened to wax, and it's not really a picture. It's not like agav the wax. There's a picture, like we say for accidents. It's very important. That's why we explained last time. That forms are not accidents, right? It's not something that happened to wax. It's not like someone would tell you, well, what there really is, like some philosophers will tell you, and some scientists now, right? That what there really is just wax, organized in such a form, but they're organized as, we pretend that doesn't exist, that doesn't need an explanation, that's not a thing. No, there really is a stamp, a picture, or whatever it is that's stamped on it. And that picture is just the wax. If you look at it, you see that it's just the wax. So it's one thing. The question if it's two things doesn't really make any sense. And not only that, and he goes on to say why he thinks that this is really what we mean when we say one thing. In other words, when you ask me if something is one thing, what you really mean, according to Aristotle, is it a thing? And things, on the word substance. Substance is made out of matter and form. There's no substance that's not, maybe there is, but substance of these things, at least, these kind of things, is matter and form together. So you can't separate them in actuality. There's no matter without form or form without matter. These are just separations in the mind. So that's the big thing that we tried to explain last time, and we also explained that's point number 1 that we tried to get at last time. And the second point, which is like connected to that, but like a more totally even more general, was that we discussed how this is a very well-Batisha theory. Right? This is a very well-Batisha theory in the sense that it doesn't ask you to believe anything that you can't see with your eyes. It does ask you to think. So it's not well-Batish in that it asks you to think, but it's well-Batish in that it doesn't ask you to believe anything that you can't see. Well, could you see forms? Yes, of course. Anything you see the form. You also see the matter. Maybe you might even see the form more than you see the matter, but which is more is like a different discussion. But you see both. You only see both. Anything that you see is a matter and a form.
I mean, you can imagine one more.
You can't imagine one without the other. You could think of one natural. You can't imagine.
Right.
Very big difference.
Okay.
You could think of one without the other. You could understand the concept of one without the other, but you can't see them, which means imagine. You can't imagine them either because imagination is just internal seeings.
Reproducing
in general
experience.
Okay, so that's the big thing. Now, as a third thing that I would add, if we go like talk about the more general implications of this, is that this, and this is Aristotle himself. We'll get to this today also to explain how. But the third thing that you would add, so one thing I said is that it's not different, or it's the same thing, but it's a different thing. But it's a real thing. That's really how I would say it's the same thing as the soul for him is the same thing as the body, but it's a real thing. It's the real thing that the body is even. Really what a person is his form, not his matter. It's even more important than the matter, because matter, form is the definition, matter just what allows definition to exist. It's really what a person is. It's even, if you ask, that's why he often calls the form is the what.
What's the form of his living?
Form is
right?
the what it is to be that, something like that. Tuti esti or something like that in Greek. It's the what it is to be. A man is the form of a man, not the matter of a man. But that form doesn't ever exist without the matter. It's the form of a matter. Form is a thing that you can't say without matter. Okay, so it's a real thing. It's the real thing, but not a separate thing. Very important distinction that you have to remember, because these are language. Again, if you like speaking like more general, like theological kind of language, people could say, like Plato would also tell you that the soul is what you really are and not the body. And Aristotle would say, I agree with you on one count and not on the other. The soul is what you really are, and that's also your body. And what this does is, philosophically and also like all them has implications for, maybe they're not strictly implications, but it has implications for like ethics and things like that, is that his soul and body are very, very close together. You probably can't get a closer connection between the soul and body than Aristotle's theory.
Well, it's not, they're not even
without denying that one of them exists. That's what everyone else does. But without denying that one of them exists, you can't get closer.
Well,
you can't make them close, because they're literally the same thing. Same thing considered in different ways. Considered in different ways. And this is really Aristotle's big criticism of Plato, right? He has other criticisms of the more reductionist theories, which say that the soul is only a story about the elements and so on. But his big criticism of Plato is that Plato can't explain how the soul talks to the body, how the soul does anything with the body. Plato even like says, well, can the soul go away from the body like a sailor can go away from his ship? He's the driver of the ship, he's the mover of the ship, but he doesn't, not part of it. And according to Aristotle, this is very stupid. This leaves a huge hole in your explanation of the world, because now you have to figure out a whole way of explaining how the soul interacts with the body. Known in modern philosophy as the interaction problem, or not exactly the same problem, but
the body, right?
Yeah, exactly. But it's some kind of version of the similar problem, not the same exact problem. But like if you read Platonist people or Machiavelli, you see them figuring out all kind of answers to this problem. Like sometimes they say, well, there's something in between the soul and the body, and Aristotle mentions this that allows the soul to move the body and so on.
Do any of these versions account that it end up being Aristotle's soul?
No, because the big thing is that it's there's different reasons because I don't think of the soul as the form of the body. I think of the soul as a separate form or mover of the body.
Do they have a form of the body and just refuse to call it soul?
That's not the soul. The phrase, this is the soul.
The explanatory method, I guess, doesn't allow it.
No, I don't know if no. At least the big thing is Aristotle is always going to say that you need to explain why this, and this is another thing that he says, you have to explain why this soul is in this body. Getting that very specific. He says if you have a soul is a thing that allows things to move things, for example. Well, you didn't explain why human souls move humans and animal souls move animals. And it's true. And he says Plato believes in the transmigration of souls, known in Yiddish as Gilgulim. And for Aristotle that's nuts, because that means that the soul doesn't explain anything. Because if my soul could move you, or maybe mine, yours are the same, but
moving?
Exactly. What explains the kind of movement that humans does? If it's just a general principle of movement, well, maybe Plato would find add another piece to his system to fix this problem. But for him, that's the big issue. So, therefore, his version of just the soul and the body being the same thing as matter and form, crosses out this problem altogether. And therefore, does this make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I like to do this, and maybe I'm just confusing you into this. Therefore, if someone comes and tells you, Yiddishkeit believes in the achdus of the soul and the body, at least one way of explaining this is plain Aristotle. And which means, I don't know if it's, there's a very traditional like sort of reactionary position that tries to say this. Well, the Greeks separated the soul from the body, and originally it wasn't. Aristotle doesn't. He's very explicitly trying to put back together the soul and the body. But that, what exactly that means, I'm just like making an association here.
Can I ask you a question? You might be heading this way. I'm just going to ask it just to see if we are. Why is it that things that are alive have this double potentiality, and things that are
No, that's what it means for things to be alive. Not like a why.
Saying, is there any further explanation exactly what it was?
Yeah. So now, since we understand this, that this really, in other words, what happens here now, in some way, is that we have to explain the body before we explain the soul, or the matter side of this. In other words, both sides of this equation are explaining the same thing, and therefore we have to explain both of them. In other words, I can explain what the form of a soul is, or like what the definition of a soul. Again, like we talked about the example of anger. This guy talks the example of dancing. Okay, the ability to dance, not dancing, the activity, right? Because that's second actuality. But the ability to dance, what is it? Well, it's two things. Okay, it's having the correct kind of legs and muscles and whatever, and it's also having the art of dancing, the ability to dance. Okay, for example, if a guy is a dancer and he breaks his foot, he might still have the ability to dance in one sense and not in another, right? But what is the actual ability to dance? It's both. You can't separate them. It's the ability of these muscles and these feet and these hands or whatever to do the activity called dancing. And in other words, if I want to explain you what is dancing, I could give you two accounts, and we need both of them to give a full account. I can explain that dancing is moving a step forward and 3 steps backwards, or whatever the dance is, or whatever a better definition would be. Or I could tell you dancing is these muscles moving in these ways. Like certain disciplines will like one answer more than the other, but they're both needed to have a full account. And the same thing for the soul in the most general sense, which we're up to in this. We need to explain what is it in general, right? Which is shared by all things that have souls, all animals and plants, all living things, that makes them a body that can have a soul. And this can is really the soul itself, right? Because the can of the body, right? The second can, but the can of the body is the soul. And that's where he goes on to say like this. In number 8, he tries to answer this question. Okay? And that's what he's doing. In number 8, he says, it's on page 2 of here. Number 8 is answering the question, in other words, giving the side of the body, which is the body that can have soul. And it says, here, whatever has organs will be a body of this kind. Okay, that's his answer. That's the one-line answer. A body a living thing which has this kind of soul, or in other words, that second potentiality, whatever, is something that has organs. Now, what is organs? Very weird.
Which kind of potential? The second potential or the first?
Yeah, the second. Well, I'm sorry, the first.
The dead body.
The thing that is soul.
Okay.
1 second. Dead bodies don't have organs. We'll get to this.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay.
Dead bodies don't have organs. Okay. Now, what are organs? Organs are just Greek for tools. Okay. If you read Kabbalah, people talking about kalim, that's where they got this word from. In any case, organ is tools, but it could also mean something like parts. Because the way he talks about it here is he talks about parts and tools. They're the same thing, and you have to figure out, like, sometimes you read like if it means tools. Or you get the word organic, for example. If you notice that organic means natural in English, coming through Latin, through Greek, became to mean natural because Aristotle claims that natural things are organic things. But organic just means tool things.
Organisms?
Yeah, organism is this. That's an organism. An organism is a thing that has organs.
Yeah. Tool using animal.
No, a tool animal, not a tool using. An animal a soul that uses tools. Right? The body is the tool of the soul here, sort of. So tools, or another word. So what he says is something like another word to translate organs here is to say functions. In other words, and he goes on to say something like this. I think there's some words missing in my copy, but it goes on to say something like this. For example, and he goes down all the way down because he's trying to show you that this is the most general definition. So even the most basic thing that has life, in other words, a plant, has organs. Now someone will tell you, well, a plant doesn't have organs. No, a plant does have organs. Because he says, for example, let's take 2 things that living things do, like they have a protection for some parts, that plants have, like they have leaves that protect their fruit and more levels of protection. You take another example, like living thing is something that nourishes itself, takes in some nourishment or food. Plants have that. They don't look the same. So this is very important. They don't look like anything like a mouth, but a plant has a mouth. It's called a root. So in the sort of like the matter account, like if you would be thinking of like in modern science terms, plants don't have mouths because mouth is a kind of thing called a mouth. But if you think of mouth as the function of a mouth is the thing that allows you to take in food. Plants have mouths, and they have hands, and they have different kind of functions or basic functions that they need to work. So, his basic answer is a natural body, that can have life. In other words, which carries this form, which is that can have life, can be alive, is a body with organs. Okay. Now, what he means by organs, at least primarily, is that it has the ability. That it has all these parts that. One thing I would say is that the parts each do a certain thing, which altogether makes another thing. So, in other words, parts here doesn't mean like, for example, what's the difference if we go back to the line between plants and racks, right? Racks don't have parts, which is also another way to say they don't have tools, don't have organs. Why don't racks have organs? Racks can be very big. We will talk about the head of the rack in some metaphorical sense, but racks don't do anything with parts. They're not organized as one part of the rack does this, another part does that, and they both together do some third thing. It doesn't do anything with any parts that it has. It just is a rack. And all the parts of the rack are the same. The top of the rack, the bottom of the rack are the same. Right? Now, if you think of and he doesn't do that, because he's going to go in number 11 and do this. And he says, let's think about a regular tool. An artificial tool, which is not going to be what we're looking about because of this problem of artificiality. But let's talk about a basic tool made out of a rack. It's an artificial tool, okay? Take an axe. He talks about an axe, okay? Let's take an axe made out of, imagine it was made out of a rack, or metal, which is just a rack or whatever. Okay? You think, what's the difference between a tool and a rack? Like we talk about tool making animals. Okay, well, how does the rack become into a tool? What's the difference? It becomes into a tool by being differentiated into parts. The differentiation into parts is what makes things from racks into tools. And into parts, we don't mean we could cut it up into a bunch of pieces. What we mean is that it can do things. And this kind of doing is a different kind of thing. Racks also do things, as we discussed, they fall down. But this kind of doing is always doing with a specific part.
The vein's doing what
for example, let's go back to our base. With the rack, if you take a rack and you sharpen it, so now it's a knife. So now there's a sharp part and a not sharp part. And the sharp part is doing the cutting. Well, it's not doing anything, but it can be used to cut. Okay? So it already it's a tool. That's what a tool is. A tool is something that its different parts do different functions. Or maybe it's just one part, but it's like a part. Part meaning function, almost. So I'm using the word part. More complicated tools are always going to be more complicated. Organs are always going to be a bunch of organs. But I don't know if he needs it to be 2 organs, really. I keep on saying. One might be enough. Like you can ask like a single-celled organism or something, but a cell is already a bunch of things inside of it, having like a whole system. But that's his like thing. So this kind of body is something that does things with its parts. That would be my basic definition. That's what a tool is. A tool and part are the same thing. And Kabbalah also noticed this, where they talk about Kailim as differentiating things and different things. A tool is something that does different things with different parts. We could see this even by artificial tools, right? An axe doesn't do with its matter is its metal or whatever it's made out of, but it also does with its edge something. So it has an edge. It has a cutting part. Having a part is what makes things tools, or make things organs. So that's the body side. That is the matter of the form which we call life. That's the body side of which we call potentially life, right? Because it's not necessarily alive yet, or not doing the living yet, but it's alive in the sense that it has this it's an organism. Okay, that's his answer. That's his basic answer, and it's very. This is the answer to the question of what makes bodies have souls.
So they
don't just magically have souls. It's that bodies that have organs. And then Therefore, we're going to be able to explain that different kinds of organisms have different kinds of organs, which gives them a different kind of soul.
So the organs are potentially living.
They're potentially living. No, they're entirely. In other words, the potentially would be the wreck.
No, I'm not going to move beyond the organs yet. What I'm saying is the organs.
Potential for life.
The matter of the organs.
We say that soul. Let's try to work with definitions, because that's how he is.
Mm-hmm.
We say that soul is the potential for living. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
second. How do I call it? Second potential. Okay, that's what soul is. That's a formal definition, right? Material definition for that same thing. This same thing said in different words, or spoken of from the side of the body is, soul is, or body that can have soul is, which is what matter means. Matter means body that can have, right?
Is organs.
Is exactly organs. Is body that has organs, or
Organ bodies.
Organic bodies, known as organic bodies, exactly.
Okay.
And therefore we can put these both together and say a soul is the first actuality, like he underlined the definition. A soul is a first actuality of a natural body which has organs.
Is that the unifying factor of that system? Is that
No, the soul is not the unifying factor here. The soul is that. The organs.
Potential to do living.
Organs
things.
is what gives them the potential. That's what it is. It's just that if you think about it in the form side, it's called the potential of living. And if you think about it in the matter side, it's called having organs. It's the same thing. Just like dancing is having legs, and dancing is knowing how to dance. Or is knowing how to dance is not the correct definition. Dancing is moving in a certain way.
So form and matter could be said at
Or
each
being
stage.
able to move in a certain way, right? Being able to move in a certain way is dancing, and also is the ability to dance. And the ability to dance is also, from the body side, having legs that work in that way. Are they able to work in that way? In the same way, being able to live, which is the definition of the soul in the formal sense, and having organs is the definition of the soul of the body, which has a soul in the body sense, which can have a soul.
Can I just
Which can be alive.
retrace this test in the beginning for one more time? So the organs are meaning the stuff of the organs is the matter, and what the organs are is the form of the organs.
No. But you're going ready 2 levels down.
Okay.
You have to
Yeah,
remember
I'm gonna, yeah.
matter is always going to have more levels of that, because the organs themselves are made out of elements.
I
which have
understand.
their
No,
own
I'm saying
form
it's
of
the
matter.
organism.
And elements themselves are made out of something.
No, the organism,
matter,
I'm
whatever.
saying.
The organism is the matter for being an organism. Yeah.
Right.
It always ends up being circular, because once you
Right.
take out the
Yeah.
circularity,
I'm trying to close it.
organisms, in other words, things that have parts or tools. Tools meaning parts that can enact a function, are the matter of souls, which is the form of them. It's nothing different.
The matter of souls is always organic.
Again, if you go back, like, thinking without this whole form thing, which confuses you, this is what he's saying is very basic, very simple, right? He's sort of discovering a basic science, which says what is life. It's just, we could say something like a certain level of complexity, right? On matter, people would say, and that's he's saying that, right? But
That
he's just
complexity
trying
is explained in terms of it being organic.
He's just trying to explain what do you mean by complex.
That all of its parts are not
Exactly.
equal in terms of function. You can't
Exactly.
just take
There's
out the
different
liver
parts do
and
different
have it do
things.
liver things without it having.
Yeah, maybe you could, but that's already getting into details. But
Okay.
The most that's why I think of the most basic example of my knife made out of a rack. Yes.
Wait, you're making recording?
Yeah. Who's this?
When's this ending?
You have to go to sleep, sweetie, whenever it's ending.
Yeah, but I need you
It's very
to.
late. You need me to? What do you mean? You have to go to sleep now, tomorrow, okay? Please go to sleep.
Anyway, differentiating one part of it and giving it a privilege, not a privilege
Again,
function,
the fact, let's try it again. The fact that he's noticing here is a fact that you should notice as a materialist science also. In other words, because he needs it to be that way, otherwise it doesn't work. The fact that he's noticing is that living things, even the most basic living, well, we didn't even define living things, that we have to separate living things from artificial things, but the point is that living things are things that have organs. Okay? That's what it is.
And
Okay?
that gives it a level of complexity that lets it be.
It's not lets it be, is.
No, that is.
The form of that is what we call soul.
Another actuality is an actuality that has another.
That's a potential, because he thinks that the only way to explain that is to explain that as potential.
So we observe.
It gives another step in between.
We observe a different.
This is not a step in between. This is the other side of the same thing.
So we observe a specific.
We've got our glasses on, which are Aristotle glasses, which when we look at it with one side shows us form, and we look at it from at the same thing from the other side shows us body. And up until now, I just told you the form side of it, or matter. Sorry, body is the wrong definition because body is always a thing that really matter.
Form, right.
But and all I've done now, since he thinks that these are the same thing, there always has to be a way to explain it on both sides. If someone just tells him this is why if someone just tells you, well, the form did it, you have to explain, okay, but what gave the matter the ability to be that form? And the answer is having organs, or which is really another way of saying it's not what gave it ability. What is it on the body side? What is it that this? What is this form? You say it's a form of being alive. Thank you very much. That's just saying the same thing twice. What is the form? What is being alive? I need to give you some more words. The more words that he's giving you is having organs. Does this make any sense?
Yeah. Meaning we observe organ bodies, whatever that would be, the tool type of things, and then when and that observation means that there's a form of it. It's just saying the form of the organs, the organ of the body.
Is speaking in
okay, I'm not trying to.
language.
Yeah. Okay, I'm not trying to be
pick up all these words.
I'm saying is no. But I'm saying is when I have organs, they're
the
whatever organisms they'll have their form will be
alive.
a soul. We'll call its form a soul.
Yes.
Okay, fine, good. I was just somehow getting confused.
I'm not sure if I understand at all because I'm behind, but the organs are the matter of the form in a sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, the matter of the form
The
of
matter
the
of the
organs,
form of
which
the-
is the body.
Matter
right?
and form are
Yeah.
the same thing, like we
Right, they're
discussed.
the matter of the...
So,
the form,
for example,
the
just
form-
like
Yeah,
just
yeah,
like
I think
just
so.
like
Right,
just
I
like
think
just
so.
just like
I think
just
so.
like just like
It's
if we talk about our basic example of our wax stamp, right? A wax has to be a certain kind. When we say a wax and a stamp are the same thing, right? Like I explained this from the stamp side, right? It's like stamp meaning the abstract picture or whatever that the stamp is giving, right? It's this kind of it has this kind of letter or this kind of picture on it, and like also explained from the wax side. What would I say with the wax side? I would say wax, for example, and he quotes Aristotle saying this. Wax is the kind of thing that is not too hard and not too soft. Because if it would be too hard, it wouldn't ever receive the impression. If it would be too soft, it would just lose it, right? Like water. If it would be a rock, right? So wax, what does it mean for wax to be the matter of the form that it has? What it means is, on the wax side is, that it's the perfect kind of thing that you could easily stamp and have the stamp stay there. In other words, it's some kind of attribute of the matter of the wax. Wax is made out of, and if you could do a whole science of wax, of material science of wax, so to speak, like why wax is that kind of thing. And that's the explanation of that. And on the form side, the same thing is that now that would be the material cause of that, but like the can, to say it in short, you say the can receive impression is wax. The wax is the can receive impression of the impression, or the form imposed on it. The same thing for the body. The organs are the can receive life for this of the soul, which is doing things with those organs, which is those organs. It's the same thing. Okay, now we just need to add one important thing, which is to not forget that we have to that I just gave you an example, and Aristotle gave you an example of a dead thing, of a artificial thing, right? And we need to remember that artificial things don't have souls, right? Because the axe has parts, but it doesn't have souls. And why doesn't it have a soul? Because he says something like this: if an axe would actually be and if you read in number 11, he says literally like this: if an axe will be a natural body, in other words, what it means to be an axe, what the substance of an axe would be, what an axe is, that would be the soul, right? Then, if it doesn't axe, it would stop being an axe. It would be an axe in name only, or otherwise known as
a homonym.
Exactly. Only it has the same name, but not the same thing. But that happens. In other words, if we say that axe is a cutting thing, is cutting, so the soul of it would be cutting, and the body of it or the matter of it would be having a sharp edge. Right? But since axes are not living things, we don't blame them, so to speak, for not cutting. We're very happy with axes not cutting. But that's what another way of saying that the substance of an axe is artificial. And artificial means that it's more of a piece of metal than it's the axe, right? There's different ways of figuring out what artificial means, but that's
Why?
the basic
Because
way.
okay.
Because axes are more pieces of metal than they are axes, because they don't axe by themselves. They just stay pieces of metal. Even after me making it into a tool, it's only a tool for someone else to use. It's not a tool for the axe to be. So axe is not a living thing. But a living body, which is a natural body, right? The difference here is not between living and not living. The difference here is between natural and artificial, right? Natural body is natural. His definition of nature is something. Remember, it's something that moves itself, right? Something that has its principle of movement in itself. Something that, in other words, something that does what it is by itself, right? Axe is a natural body in the sense of the metal being natural, right? The metal keeps on metalling, never stops metalling, but it doesn't axe. The axe part of it is artificial. But a living thing, for example, and he goes on to talk an example of parts and wholes, but for example, a living eye sees by being an eye. It doesn't see by some artificial person seeing through it or using it to see. It sees just by being an eye. And same thing, a whole animal is an animal, or senses according to him, by being a whole animal, and not by someone, so to speak, using it as a tool. So, in other words, what we're getting at here is that souls of living things are self-moving tools. Okay, he doesn't like that. He wouldn't like the language self-moving, but that's what living things are, and that's what we call a soul. A soul is the form of the living thing, which is it having, and this is I think this is exactly what we call second actuality, meaning it has before doing it has the ability to do the acts of living by itself, not by someone else living it. Souls live by themselves; they don't have someone living them. Like axes need someone else to axe them.
So therefore, the axe doesn't have any actuality in the first step.
Exactly, he's not an actual thing at all.
Right.
He has an actuality. As
He's an actual metal.
He's an actual metal,
right.
exactly, and he's even actualized to be whatever it is to be an axe, but that's an artificial actualization. But he's not an actual axer.
There's no form
And a mouse is an actual mouser. A mouse is just not by being a mouse, but by having the ability to be a mouse, right? Which is a different kind of ability than the ability of the what do we say? The rak to be a yeah.
It doesn't require external application. An axe has to be applied to be an axe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bodies don't need to be applied to be bodies.
To be
living bodies. Sorry, don't need to be applied to be living bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, that has
Applied meaning they don't need to be. You don't need
to be applied.
The real
to
thing
the
that he's
proprietary
thinking of
activity.
is that you don't need to say anything external to it in order to explain what it is.
and if you do, then it's lacking in.
In other words, its
actuality,
being,
which
this
means
was a
it's
sign, exactly. The
Right.
being of an axe is sort of lacking being.
It's
an
form,
artificial
it's lacking
being.
its form because it's not actual.
It's
in that
lacking
sense.
exactly. It gets actualized only by someone else.
Right, so that's not,
This is true somewhat for everything, but yeah. But let's say stay in my language there. You can't say what an axe is. What's the function of axe? You can't say it without adding a person using the axe. But you could very well say what a mouse is or what a tree is without adding anyone doing the treeing. The tree is what does the treeing. And that's what we mean when we say that a tree has another kind of ability, another kind of potential that axes don't have. And that's what we call by tree having a soul. Or in other words, the form of the tree. Which is another way of saying trees have organs and axes don't have organs. Well, axes have organs, but they don't have organs that do anything, so they're not organs. It doesn't, and not only that, even when you do something with the axe, the different parts of the axe don't do different things. They all just stay what they are. And even the sharp edge of the axe is doing it by virtue of being made out of metal, which can be a sharp axe. There's no can cut in the metal. There's only can be a sharp metal. But there's a can breathe in a living thing that breathes, which then is going to go on and breathe. And then, that's all. This is all the most general thing, and now we have a program to set out to go into more detail and to explain, okay, so what is it to have a soul of a plant, and how is it different than having a soul from an animal? Now you understand that having a soul is not some like magic thing that flies in from somewhere. It's just the form of what it is to be that. And now we just give you the most general definition, which is a form of something that has organs. Okay? And then those organs go on to live. But we still need to give a detailed definition, which is what is it for a form of a tree to have organs and to do treeing, what it means to be tree, and is that different or the same from mousing and from a humaning, and which is another way of saying that we just gave you a very empty definition in some way, because I still didn't tell you what actually does it. And since his forms are not something like a sailor with a ship, it's something that is just the description, or like he wouldn't say the word description, just the definition of that matter as a form, then without actually doing the science, so to speak, like without saying, for example, I was going to do the next chapter, which is saying, so the form of a tree is to grow and to take nourishment, and the form of a person, of an animal, is to also sense, and whatever that, all those things, those are actually the real definitions of the souls. Does that make sense? So what we just gave is what it is to be a soul in general. But since it's this kind of definition, it turns out to be empty and not so much, without talking about what kind of organization allows the tree to be a tree. And then again, we can do this itself from the most general, all trees, and then this kind of tree, and then all the way down from all of that. But that's the basic. I think that concludes the, more or less. There's some other things they talk here about parts and wholes, but I don't know if it's so relevant to explain. That concludes the series of answering the question of what is the general definition of a soul. And what we added today is the most very important part, which is that this all has to be said from the side of the body too. Otherwise, it doesn't explain us what it even means to be the form of a body. Because otherwise, it's an organic form, the form of something that has organs, in the most general sense. And there you understand also why we need to. This is not enough at all, because we need to continue to go into the details and explain what a specific soul or a specific kind of soul is. Which means like sort of differentiating within soul different kinds of souls, and then all the questions of how connected they are and so on.
What another way to say this thing you said at the end is that the we just explained what something that has a second potentiality, and then we're gonna get into what those potentialities are and make further categories in that. Like a tree, like a plant, and an animal, they're gonna have different potentialities.
Yes. So an animal, for example, breathes and a tree doesn't breathe, or whatever, and that's part of. Well, we have to figure out which part of it is important to being a tree, and also what it is, because I just told you, like, I just said that it's something that has organs. Well, there's nothing that has organs. There's only things that have specific kind of organs, right? This is just a general understanding. It's not a, which really means it doesn't. It's just a sort of empty definition. Especially because Aristotle doesn't really believe in species being very helpful to talk about. At least that much. Whatever he thinks about universal, he thinks that we mostly have to think about the individual things. That's how we're gonna understand.
I'm even less pleased. I mean, looking back, I'm very displeased with my old notes, but this time, even as I'm writing it,
I hope that this finishes this. And I also hope that we can now read this whole page from beginning to end and more or less understand all of it.
Okay, that's
I'm not going to really do it, but you can do it.
Okay. By the way, could you look over the notes also?